Hello, everybody. I am here with Neel from the Ann Arbor Area Community Foundation. Super excited. Happy beginning of the week. Week 900,000 of being indoors.
Plus or minus, right?
Yes. Neel is the head of the Ann Arbor Area Community Foundation, which is the community foundation in Washtenaw County, and they do a broad set of things. So that's why I kind of want to hear a little bit more about like what a community foundation is, and then what Ann Arbor Area Community Foundation does specifically.
Yeah, totally. So it's interesting because in one sense, Emily, we're like a niche enterprise. But on the other hand, there's 700 community foundations across the country, representing most of the country in terms of geography. So community foundations have two defining characteristics. The first is, in addition to being foundations, we have a geography as our mission rather than a cause. And so for us, the Ann Arbor Area Community Foundation, our geography is Washtenaw County. But different community foundations may cover a whole state all the way down to a city for some of the bigger cities.
Oh, okay.
And then the second defining characteristic is we specialize in permanent charitable funds. And so gifts to the community foundation actually get invested in a range of funds with different purposes and goals. And then we invest and distribute in a way that the funds remain in perpetuity. And so the story I like to share is there's a fund we started in the early 80s with $500,000. Since then, that fund has distributed triple its original gift value in the form of grants. And its current value is triple its original value, which means it's kept up with inflation. And so over time, we've amassed $140 million in assets, 550 charitable funds. And the other cool thing about community foundations is, like you mentioned, man, we cover the whole range of charitable activities. If you name a charitable cause, we've been engaged in it one way or another, whether it's human services, the arts, the environment, civic engagement, everything you can think of. And so it's a really cool place to be because we touch so many parts of the community.
Yeah. And where were you before? You were at New, right? Before you were at...
Yeah, I was actually started life as a corporate attorney at Ford Motor Company, worked in headquarters, and that was good stuff. Yeah, definitely. And then I took a sabbatical for a year and went to work at New, where my former boss at Ford became the CEO, woman named Susan Katz-McFall, and she was a great mentor and friend. And our deal was we were going to work together for a year at New, and then I was going to go back to being an attorney. But I liked working in the nonprofit sector so much, I ended up staying at New for 9 years and then jumped over to the Community Foundation just about a decade ago. So there was no plan in place, but I just fell in love with the idea of waking up in the morning, trying to help community organizations in the community do better every day, you know?
Yeah, I feel like that's kind of when I was in economic development. So I started out in public accounting, and I was like just having it's like I got out of college, and by the time I was 25, I was like, I've ruined my life. Why did I do this? And I was like, I have my master's in accounting. What am I going to do? And like then started in economic development, and it was more like that shift of like, oh yeah, you like are doing something that's like positive, like has a positive focus of like growing businesses and helping people and that kind of thing. That was like kind of, I was like, oh, this is like so refreshing and like fun. So everybody leave being a lawyer and an accountant and join.
Right. But you know, I gotta say, I didn't have a problem with shareholder value, and I'm a car guy, so I really like being at a car company. So I was really jealous of the folks I worked with who loved their job and loved everything they did. And I was really enriched by the experience, but I didn't wake up in the morning being like, okay, I'm going to go tell people no today, who are trying to do weird things at the company. And so I'm glad I finally found what wakes me up in the morning. That was the biggest thing for me. And it still wakes me up in the morning, which is awesome.
Yeah, I do really like having a technical background too. Like I think like if you have a technical background, then go to a non-technical. Like I was an auditor and was doing, and now we do like research and data analysis and things like that in the same vein. So I think it's still like there's a lot of applicability. Applicability? Is that a word?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, cool. So I guess second question. How has Ann Arbor Area Community Foundation pivoted to better support the Ann Arbor region during the pandemic?
Yeah, so I'll start by saying because of the model that I mentioned, the endowment model, we're one of the rare industries where we can lean into a pandemic. There's no contraction. There's no worry about our sustainability. So we leaned in hard with our staff. And in fact, we've been hiring through the pandemic.
Yeah.
So we moved $1 million in grants and other support in the matter of a little over a month, and did so in coordination with a lot of communities we have that advise the grant making that we do, and then did so also in really deep connection with the nonprofits we work with. But also, I'm really glad for the last 5 years, in addition to working with nonprofits, right? And that's how you think of foundations, you grant to nonprofits.
Yeah.
We've also been developing through a lot of experts locally relationships with communities, neighborhoods, communities of identity, like Latinx folks across Washtenaw County, posing the question, hey, we don't have all the answers. We don't live your experience. How can we as philanthropy make a better difference and not assume we know what the right answers are? And so I'll tell you, leveraging those conversations that we've already been having during the pandemic was key, because yes, we definitely supported nonprofits, but we also moved money through communities as well. And we think that way we can just be that much more effective in, frankly, helping people out. And also, we really focused in. We focused in on older adults, which is kind of a specialty of ours based on the funds that we have. And we also focused in on 48197 and 198, which is Ypsilanti in Washington County, because the data that our public health department disaggregated showed that infection rates and hospitalization rates in those two zip codes were like 3 to 4 times higher than the county as a whole, and it tracked with more African Americans being there. So I'd say the other part, in addition to just saying we're moving money and we're listening to the community, we really did say we have to target those affected the most by the pandemic, and that definitely included African American residents in Washtenaw County. And then 2 other things I'll mention, Emily. We also invested in small business relief through a broader coalition of public and private funders.
Yeah, I saw that.
And we invested in artist relief through the Arts Alliance. And then the new twist, the only new thing we really did was launch a nonprofit loan program, where we've now, I think, loaned about $250,000 out to, I think it's 6 different nonprofits.
Cool.
And that was the idea that we'd bridge them to PPP loan forgiveness or other revenues that were coming later in the year, but they really needed some short-term cash flow relief.
Yeah, that's true. I think I am just worried about the recovery for sure. Like we did an analysis on, maybe this is my next question. I'm like already like, and then I'm like, wait. Okay, yeah, I'll just ask the next question then. So the Ann Arbor Area Community Foundation did support us in pushing out a survey for studying the business impact of COVID-19 on Washtenaw County businesses, which we released the preliminary findings about a week and a half ago on that. And I have literally no idea how that report turned out to be like 76 pages. Even as I was like doing it, I was like, oh my God, this is getting so long, but it's like super in depth. And so people can check that out. But it's one focus of the report was looking at the dramatic reduction in revenue of local businesses and also some of the inequities in relief efforts. And so what are some of the ways that community organizations like Ann Arbor Area Community Foundation are helping to address some of the shortfalls that the pandemic's creating, and that some of the relief efforts are creating, and will probably continue to see as being a larger issue over the next year and a half?
Yeah, and so that kind of reveals an interesting element of how philanthropy works. Economic development isn't the primary center of gravity for philanthropy. And in fact, federal policy kind of tracks with that. Is there's a whole ecosystem, as you know better than I do, around business development and economic development. And philanthropy has always been careful to say, that's not us, because there's so much capital in that area. We're focusing on bettering everyone's lives through philanthropy and in charitable activities. But on the other hand, when we talk about bettering people's lives in the long term, they need jobs. It's good to own businesses because that enables people to be more independent and take more control of their lives. And so we know that there's like this inevitable crossover. And so, yeah, we've granted some money to business relief funds. We'll keep looking at that. But I'll tell you where I think we're going to make our biggest difference is, I mentioned we're a grant maker, but we also have a $140 million endowment. That endowment, traditionally, we've invested globally, like a lot of institutional investors, international, national, all sorts of asset categories. Just last year, we started investing locally for the first time in our history. And that's what we want to do more of. And I think that's where there's a great intersection between our goal, which is bettering people's lives, and the goal of economic development, which is stronger, more sustainable businesses, and vibrant and growing. And so the more we can direct our local portfolio locally, right now we have about $1.5 million committed locally, and we want that to grow over time. I think that's an unusual way we can play a role as investor rather than grant maker, because frankly, our grants are still going to be focused on charitable organizations as well as scholarships to students.
Yeah.
And so we're looking at investments right now that are targeting women in minority-owned businesses, because we think it's so important for there to be focus on that particular segment of business owner, to your point, because they've traditionally been undercapitalized and underbanked.
Yeah.
And we need to do something about it. We can't just hope and cross our fingers.
Yeah, that was like probably one of the most surprising or unsurprising, really, depending on like how I'm feeling how sassy I'm feeling that day, is that, I mean, for a lot of the studies we do, we like verify the data inputs, make sure that like, everything it was accurate. And then you just total down and then you see like, what's the rate of this or how many of this are there? And like, it's really not like we do some like algorithms and like all of these things. It's really like, what is this compared to this? Oh, this is higher. And and that was like one of the major findings was that like the denial rates of PPP loans specifically, and then largely bank loans that were going to businesses during this time, the denial rates were much, much higher in minority-owned businesses versus white-owned businesses. And that's not like any sort of us finessing the numbers or looking at just this little area. It's like Washtenaw County businesses. Here's the number that are owned by white people, and here are the minority owned businesses, and like who's been denied loans, and then you look at the total. So it was something like nearly 20% of loans that minority owned businesses had applied for, they'd received a denial for, and it was 8% for white-owned businesses. And so, I mean, it's like the starkest difference between any population within Washtenaw County. We looked at different geographies, different sectors, different like men versus women. And it was like minority-owned businesses was just like the far outlier of all the things. So I definitely think that's going to kind of cause an additional ripple effect when we see like poverty rates and unemployment rates and things like that.
Well, and you're describing a cycle that's been around for centuries. And so, some folks may be inclined to look at that and say, well, it's based on merit and objective considerations. And my response to that is that's broken logic, because unless we break that cycle, well, guess what? Now that they don't have the PPP loans, it's going to be a self-fulfilling prophecy. There will be higher failures.
Yeah.
And then the other piece I'd say is we just need to listen more. We love data. We love the work that you do. We're a data-driven organization. But we consider data also to be the voice of people we're purporting to help more and more. And so part of what we're trying to do is saying, let's look at the data. Let's let the data reveal some truths that are always nuanced, right? But man, let's talk to people. Let's talk to minority business owners and say, what's your journey been like? Where can we help the most? Where do you think we can make a difference? And I think that's going to be critical in the next few years to not to come to conclusions on here's what the data says, therefore here's what's best for all of you. Or of here's what the data tells us to query more on. Now let's go talk to folks and say, what's the path forward? And then frankly, bridge that. So, why are banks engaging more deeply with their existing clientele? There's some obvious reasons, but again, self-fulfilling prophecy, right? Of course, banks want their existing clients to get those loans first, and it's a natural instinct. But maybe that's part of the issue as well. And I'm not picking on banks for a second. They're really good partners, and I have a lot of respect for the local banks in Washtenaw County. But at the same time, sometimes these things are structural. It's not about anyone's intentions. It's about how the system is set up. And I think what you've described, Emily, it's not the bad intentions of people. I think it's just how the system is set up. And that's part of what we need to be talking about.
Yeah. And I think that's, I mean, what you touched on is so true. I think like if you are just doing data analysis and then making a decision, there's a lot of like context there that's lost that can explain some of the trends you're seeing. And so that's what we kind of really encourage people to like have those open conversations. And that's kind of what we do too when we're putting together a lot of these research reports, is that if we look at something and I'll be like, kind of like, I don't know why that would be higher, or like, I don't know why this would be decreasing over time, and then tend to like email out to specific people or like ask different groups of people that might be affected by this trend, like, why do you think that is? And then that leads us to kind of be able to check against other data sets based on those conversations that can kind of put those a little bit more in context for people, because it is so true. I think like the way the structure is set up is creating, and I think having conversations with bankers as well as conversations with people that are applying for businesses to find out what that disconnect is, so that it can fix some of those inequities in lending.
Well, and I also mentioned, so listen, if you're a numbers person, the biggest force for change are our capital markets, straight up, in any capitalistic society anyway. So that's very true of the US. And so for me, I'd like to be a part of helping to crack the code on how we unleash all that capital with a more positive bent to it. So not this, quote unquote neutral, the markets will find the best places for return. But, I would love for the markets to also find the best places to move society forward. And I don't think those two things are as separate as people make them out to be. I'm not saying I want the capital markets to become charitable. I'm no dummy. That's actually not what I want. But what I want to be a part of locally is, how can we do well in the capitalistic community and do good by the people living in the community? And I don't think that's an unfair approach. I think we can be very successful in thriving economically and making money and owning businesses and hiring people and bringing along more people than we have over the last few centuries.
Yeah, and I think you guys it's really great that you guys are taking a portion of the endowment to invest locally, because I mean, you do see like so much of the capital that you invest that if people are spending at big box stores or at online marketplaces like Amazon and things, and then you compare that to like if they bought that same product for somewhere locally, the amount of capital that then like stays circulating locally is so much higher than if they're just like basically exporting capital outside. So I think like kind of following that logic and like you guys doing more investing locally, I feel like that I can only think that will have a greater impact on the local community as well.
Yeah. The other thing I'll mention, Emily, is that even in Washtenaw County, my gosh, the contrast between adjacent communities is huge, right? And so whether it's Ann Arbor, Ypsi, whether it's high population density to the more rural areas of the county, there's a lot of capital flowing into some very narrow places in Washtenaw. And so that's the other thing about buying local and investing locally. Part of what we're trying to do is stretch perspectives for everybody to say, and hey, there are really great opportunities on the east side of the county. Or, hey, look at Milan and Manchester and Chelsea and investable opportunities there. If we take that approach, I think we just end up both with better investment results, I think research has shown, and also more equitable outcomes.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, next question. This is a little bit of a pivot. So Ann Arbor Area Community Foundation is also supporting our upcoming 2020 Ann Arbor Entrepreneurial Ecosystem Report, which is focused on the tech community in Washtenaw County, although we call it Ann Arbor. Don't judge. So we're releasing that in a couple of months, but can you kind of talk a little bit about Ann Arbor Area Community Foundation's work in the tech community in the region? And I know that you guys had hired Trista Van Tine recently, and she's doing like some really awesome stuff with the Ann Arbor Entrepreneurs Fund.
Mm-hmm.
And so just talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, sure. So first of all, Trista Van Tine is awesome. She's been a great addition to the team. And so let me talk about it, Emily. This has been a 10-year conversation that we've just pivoted to action on in the last year and a half. And it was conversations with sort of entrepreneurs like Doug Song was really at the genesis of this 10 years ago and saying,
Yeah.
man, look what's going on in Boulder. Look what's going on in Austin. There's this deliberate link between the high growth entrepreneur founders and linking to community and doing well and doing good.
Mm-hmm.
And so, entrepreneurs get busy. And so those conversations kind of came and went for years. And then, Doug Song came back along with several other, Jeff Rinveld, Doug Neel, Adrian Fortino, and they all coalesced, right? In Bhushan Kulkarni. And they said, hey, now's the time. And this is about 2 years ago. And so this is why we got interested. We want to condition more successful business people to link their work to community good. So Ann Arbor Entrepreneurs Fund wasn't us saying, oh gosh, now we're going to be in economic development, not by a long shot, right? What we're saying is, let's start building a community of founders who are also talking to each other about best community practices in addition to best business practices and how'd you get your next round of funding and hey, I'm dealing with these issues. How do I deal with my growing staff and that sort of thing? And there are models out there that we could emulate. And then what Trista's done a great job of doing is she benchmarked pretty much every known model out there, brought it all together and coalesced it around here's how we can make this work in Washtenaw County. So the vision is that there's going to be a stronger community of founders of high growth industries in Washtenaw County. It'll become an attractor, right, to investment. So there's that classic win-win. And then every entrepreneur who's a part of this commits 1% of the equity of their companies to a permanent fund at the Ann Arbor Area Community Foundation that then it grants out to the community. So there's also a direct link to charitable activities through the success, growth, and exits of these founders. And then, frankly, the longer term vision is we're actually conditioning the next generation of philanthropists, right? These 20, 30, and 40 somethings, a lot of them are going to make homes in these communities. They're going to be successful. And we want them to think about philanthropy as being an important part of their lives, right? A must have rather than a nice to have. And so the vision is even 20 years from now, we're hoping that the benefits of the strong community that we're building now are actually going to pay off, not through that community foundation, but just through people who are philanthropic, who are engaged, and understand that there's more to life than just making money, right?
Yeah, I think that the songs, both Doug and Lynn are really great examples of that too, of like, they really, like, as they kind of accumulated wealth, have done so many things. I mean, Lynn is applying for or is running for a
city council
things. Mm-hmm. I'm like the government thing. I'm in her ward. Ward 2, vote for Lynn. But no, I think that but they're like, it really involved in public service and supporting the community and a lot of community initiatives, and certainly during the pandemic have like stepped up and started a fund and things. And I think like that is a lot of tech founders have that goal and so it gives them a really great like pathway to being able to support the community more. So I think that's really great. Mm-hmm. Well, great. Okay, so you guys are doing so many things, so busy, all remote. I guess we'll end this quick conversation with a little fun thing of like, is there anything that you're looking forward to doing once things are now that things are started opening up and it's summer? Anything fun you guys are looking forward to for the summer?
Yeah. So my family, I'm a family of 5, myself, my wife, 3 teenagers. We're looking forward to paddling down the Huron River. We were just talking about it. It's something that my wife and I love because we all disconnect, and the teenagers love it. And it's one of the closest times we can have as a family. Now, personally, Emily, I'm a golfer in the summer Michigan tradition. And so I have gotten back to golf when I can find the time because it's a nice distanced activity, but I'm definitely looking forward to getting more into that. And then frankly, we're going to stay mostly virtual as the foundation through at least at least through August. I have resolved to do more Zoom calls on my deck instead of inside. So
Yeah. Oh, nice.
I'm even looking
Perfect.
forward to that. And I realize that's not a fun answer, but man, I just could use some
That's
sun
pretty fun
and some
compared to
blue
sitting inside,
sky.
which is what we've been doing.
Yeah, I mean, pretty fun, says the former auditor, right? Like,
Yeah,
I'm not sure what our benchmark is here. It says the auditor to the former corporate attorney.
yeah,
Like,
we're like,
everyone else is rolling
golfing is
their eyes.
so
Like,
great.
pretty fun, right? Hey, Emily, let's talk numbers. Oh my God, yeah, let's talk numbers.
Let me tell you a thing. Yeah. What is your favorite Michigan course?
Oh, favorite Michigan course, gosh.
Anyway.
Pierce Lake out in Chelsea, I love. And then in Bradrick Farms, which is the more private U of M course. But I teach at U of M, so I get to play it.
That's fancy.
Is an awesome course. But then my home course is Lake Forest. It's a public course 2 minutes away from my house, and so I actually can sneak away and hit some balls and be back in very short amount of time, which is cool.
Perfect. Yay. Well, great. Well, thank you so much for joining us all. And I look forward to seeing you again, hopefully soon in person.
Yeah, that sounds great, Emily. Thanks for having me.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.